Hi, it's Harry here. Welcome to a special Talking Feds episode as part of Pride Month. The last few years have brought something of a retrenchment politically in many red states that threaten the gains of the LGBTQ community from the courts, Congress, and society at large. Nevertheless, in 2023, it's mainly the case that gays and lesbians are able to be open and generally accepted in professional life. But it wasn't that long ago that nearly the opposite was true. Well-known members of the community today started their professional lives in a world of prejudice, exclusion, and shame. All our political institutions, but most importantly, the Supreme Court and the executive branch, countenanced express discrimination against homosexual people and conduct, relegating them at best to second-class stations and at worst to criminal status. So I'm very happy to be joined today by two well-known public servants who came through these medieval days and can explain to us the lived professional lives of gays and lesbians in what is a not-so-distant past. And they are Robert Raben, an old friend and colleague and current president of the Raben Group, a public policy firm he founded in 2002, but decades of government experience, especially with Congressman Barney Frank. Himself, I believe, Robert, you can confirm this, the first openly gay member in Congress, and that was after a whole, story and delay. Yeah, a whole Megillah, and Keith Boykin, who's now a TV and film producer, author of 6 books, but was special assistant to President Clinton and the highest-ranking openly gay official in the White House. So thank you, both of you, for joining. So I don't know where to, let's say, Bowers v. Hardwick's 1986, but around then, when you're beginning your professional lives, just sort of set the stage for how it was for gays and lesbians in government, or maybe generally, and the kinds of details of what it meant to be on the job with a different sexual orientation. Robert pointed to you, Keith, because you are, after all, the highest ranking.
Highest ranking, yes. Yes.
Yeah, a title I shared with Paul Richard, who was also a special assistant to the president at the same time.
Okay.
It was a very different time from the one we live in today. You were right about Bowers v. Hardwick in the 80s. And then I was in law school from 1989 to 1992. I met Bill Clinton in 1992. I came out in 1991. I met Bill Clinton in 1992 and decided to work for his campaign after law school. And then when he was elected, I went to work in the White House. And I didn't realize, I was openly gay at that point, and I had just come out a year before, but I didn't realize that was a big deal until...
Right, I mean, he comes out of the box. His first act is Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is already a kind of, compromise, and it's a debacle. Well, I'm sorry, I'm telling your story. So you're openly gay, and you literally you thought you could just sort of saunter in, and it would be, a non-issue.
Well, there are a lot of things I didn't realize. I thought the world was changing quicker than it was, because Bill Clinton came to Harvard and spoke at the Kennedy School in 1991, I believe. And he was asked a question by a student if he would lift the ban on gays in the military. And he said, yes, he would.
By the way, what was the ban? Just tell us, because this will blow people's minds who don't know it.
Well, LGBTQ people were not allowed to serve openly in the military.
Not allowed to serve. I mean, you could say openly, but they could hide their identity. But the military refused to permit LGBT to be part of to serve their country. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, there were a few exceptions. People like Sergeant Perry Watkins, who managed to slip by under some sort of technicality for a few years. But for the most part, you couldn't serve if you were gay or lesbian in the military. And I just assumed it was going to change because Bill Clinton said he was going to change the policy. And I remember sitting in the White House with the president in the Oval Office, the first ever meeting with LGBTQ leaders in April of 1993. And one of the participants in the meeting asked Bill Clinton what he thought he'd be remembered for in history. And he said two things. First, lifting the ban on gays in the military. And second, healthcare reform. Neither one of those he did. And the irony, of course, is that my schoolmate Barack Obama was the one who did both of those things. But the other part of it is that I came into the White House. I met Robert, I think, shortly after I came into the White House, because we used to kiki and talk and gossip all the time. And he would share a lot of information about what's going on. I'd share a lot of intel about what's going on my end. I walked in just assuming it was going to be a cakewalk. And I didn't realize two things. First, that there'd be so much opposition to the gays in the military plan, and it would ultimately result in this debacle of the don't ask, don't tell compromise. Second, I didn't realize that my own sexual orientation was going to be an issue because I just assumed everybody knew I was gay and it wasn't going to be a problem. But I got a call back from Gary Aldrich, who was the FBI agent assigned to me. I think he later wrote a book exposing the Clintons, supposedly, for the right-wing media. But he called me into his office and told me they found out that they had some new information about me after I'd already started working in the White House, that I may be living an alternative lifestyle.
That's how he put it?
Yeah. And I said, alternative to what? What does that even mean?
Alternative to what? The subject replied. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. I can see him writing it down. But he was kind of nervous about it. And then he said, well, we have information you might be gay. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of public information. There's a story about me in the Washington Blade. Like, why is this like a secret for the FBI? But I didn't even realize that was a controversy back then. So apparently it was. And the fear was that if you were openly gay, if you were gay, regardless of the open part, if you were gay, it could be a subject of
you could be blackmailed. And we'll get to that in a moment. Let me just switch you, because you're also president in the Clinton administration. I think everybody who was there, I was there, and I worked on the issue that Keith is just talking about, but everyone understood that Clinton, in his heart, really wanted to do this, so assumed that he would be, well, not, that was very, I think, seemed very sympathetic and would give some political capital. But then he gets into office and, bumps up against forces that maybe, well, I just wonder how you felt, whether it was sort of disappointing. And I also wanted to ask you to kind of respond or second what Keith was talking about whether personally, it was at all weird, funky, whatever, to be in the Department of Justice under Janet Reno. I was working at the time for an openly gay assistant attorney general, maybe the first one. But was there any kind of feeling of, having to be buttoned down or cloistered, or was it only a kind of, policy struggle? And I'm going to add one more thing and shut up so you guys can both talk, because I'd like, if it wasn't then, you were in law school, Keith, but it wasn't that long before then, maybe before you came out, that it was, it was a huge pressure on your shoulders, just personally living. And what was that like? But let's go over to the Department of Justice and your sort of experience in that bureaucracy, Robert.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you for devoting the show to this. It's such an important topic. I'm really delighted that you're doing it. Keith, it's wonderful to see you. I want to underscore what an exquisite and amazing moment it was to have Keith Boykin in the White House. He, notwithstanding sort of his own being an ingenue, like, why would anyone care that I'm gay? It was historic. It was monumental. It was something we rallied around. And let me just give you a little context. I'll get to DOJ in a second. I'm a few years older than Keith, but it really goes to how wildly different people's experiences are in any group, and particularly those of us who are gay. First of all, we were homosexuals at the time. We were trying to be gay, but the New York Times wouldn't call us gay. We were homosexuals. It was, and that was both grating but important because everybody focused on our sex acts as opposed to our identity, which is much broader for most people than with whom we have sex or don't have sex, as the case may be. My context, and I'm not my favorite topic, says the narcissist, but I'm born and raised in Miami, Florida. I'm 13 years old, and Anita Bryant, who was America's sweetheart, leads an effort to basically remind us under law that we are alien, criminal, predatory creatures. So for those of you who don't know, Miami-Dade passed one of the first gay rights ordinances in the country. And Anita Bryant, Miss America, leads a campaign in Florida to undo it. And it was demonic. The manner in which homosexuals were displayed was as what I just said. The males were child sex predators. That was basically our essence. These were television ads.
We're in the 70s here. Disco, it's not.
We're in
that
1976, America's bicentennial. The Miami, so like most major cities, Miami had two newspapers, and the afternoon newspaper routinely printed pictures of any homosexual who was arrested the day before for being a homosexual. So me growing up, and I think my story is much more common than others, we were not featured in television. There were no role models. We didn't have openly gay people in our families that we could sort of go to for how do I become a law firm partner as an openly whatever. We were aliens within our own communities and families. That's the context. It was criminal to be homosexual. We could not work in the federal government. We could not get with fill in the blank. For Keith Boykin to, as you say, saunter, which made me smile, he may adapt, I don't know if he sauntered, into the White House was monumental. To have a president who would hire an openly gay person was monumental. I don't know if it was unprecedented, but it was monumental. So it was a very exciting time for us. I worked in Congress for 7 years. I worked for the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee, and I thought I was closeted. I was outed at some point. Other people thought I was out. That's generally the case with a lot of people. A light doesn't go off, and all of a sudden you're gay.
Wait. So your view, in your own view, you were closeted while you're working in the House.
Yeah, I left Arnold and Porter, the law firm that I worked at, because I was closeted, and I couldn't imagine being an openly gay person in a large institution, and it was not a welcoming place, although it was better than other law firms. And I went to Congress, which was a much more welcoming place. I eventually came out because when we worked in Congress on the codification of the ban for gays in the military, which I'll get to in a second, as in most identity politics, I'm working for one of only two openly gay members of Congress, Barney Frank and Gary Studs. I worked for Barney, and I was his counsel. And so
when did he come out? Because there was this whole big thing with Frank and it
was the late '80s where Barney in the midst.
And he'd been in Congress a long time before then. As
he had been in the state legislature, he'd been in Congress a bit. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Gary Studs came out voluntarily.
Yeah.
Barney, I would say, was really forced to be out, although
Yeah.
he says he went first. In any event, we handled the gay issues.
It's nice for that to be a historical kind of, argument. Okay, go ahead.
So we handled the ban on gays in the military, and I'm the counsel. And when you're working with those who were courageous enough to be openly gay at the Human Rights Campaign Fund and the various groups that worked on it, they sort of wanted to know who you are, Raben. Why are you working on this? And in that context, I was sort of pulled out. And I'm grateful that I am. I've never met anyone except for those who were beaten and killed. And that's a huge exception. But I don't deal with people who were killed. I've rarely met people who were outed who at some point in their lives regretted it. I think most people are happy to have been, to be openly gay. In any event, we worked on banning gays in the military. We worked on HIV travel bans. We worked on bans on adoption. Pick an issue. And there was negative action, funding for HIV, the ability to give accurate information to people about how to prevent sexually transmissible diseases. All of that was banned in the appropriations bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward.
Especially, so there'd be riders on the appropriations bill, as we now have for abortions or whatever. None of the money kind of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this is sort of an old chestnut, but the IRS, well into the 80s, required a gay organization. Well into the 70s, required a gay organization as a condition of its C3 to certify that homosexuality was a pathology. There's no piece of the government that didn't regulate against homosexuals. And for your audience that doesn't know, number one, people feared homosexuality. Number two, some in the right made a huge living demonizing us. The Family Research Council, Phyllis Schlafly, it was their organizing principle to tell the American public that we were predators and that we were coming for your children. They do that now on critical race theory, but they used to do it on homosexuality. And so this was just the way it was. Fast forward, when you haven't mentioned it, and I think it's an important part of why you're doing this program, people should know communists and homosexuals were banned from security clearances, access to classified information throughout the federal government, essentially until 1998. De facto, it stopped a little bit earlier. Homosexuals were banned from federal employment formally until 1975, informally well into the 90s, the notion being that if you were openly gay, then you were a sexual pervert. If you were closeted, then you were susceptible to blackmail. And so there was no third choice. And so the condition of gay people in the entire federal government, not just the military, was abysmal until extremely recently. Clinton was heroic in sort of ending that. I went to the Department of Justice, Attorney General Reno, President Clinton hired me or named me to be confirmed. For those who don't know, for senior positions at the agencies, you have to go through the Senate confirmation process. No then homosexual male had ever been confirmed by the United openly. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover was obviously closeted. No openly gay person, male, had ever been confirmed. Your coworker, your dear friend L.D. Atchison, was the first gay woman to be confirmed, and it was a non-event. It happened so fast. It wasn't clear that they knew, and I think it helped that she was Dean Atchison's progeny. So I'm the first up, and it was unpretty. It was a thing that I'm gay. And in fact, and I've not talked about this publicly, but I'm ready to, Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, who was on the Judiciary Committee that confirmed me, told me in a meeting with him that he was voting against me because he didn't think a homosexual could have a position of authority in this nation. I mean, the discrimination was real. But Clinton's leadership and people like Keith Boykin really turned the page. They put an enormous amount of political capital into trying to demonstrate to the American public that we were three-dimensional humans, that we had the same share of advantages and disadvantages as any other group, and that he and his wife, Mrs. Clinton, were willing to fight to educate Americans about what was really going on with the condition of gay people in this country.
Yeah, let me shift it back now to you, Keith. Very briefly, I'll give my this a period that I'm very familiar with because there was a big effort, and I worked on it, for L.D. Atchison to reform the SF-86. So I, a lot of meetings with, some Sessions types, but others like the General Counsel of the FBI, who was at pains to disavow any kind of personal prejudice, but it was always this thing: you could be outed, and therefore we have to keep this. And it was a big fight to reform that SF-86 form. But and Robert has mentioned some of the great importance that you and maybe a very small handful of other people were in the government. But I wonder if you can remember those days of the first breakthroughs, and what's your sense of the relative contributions of people within government and without government? That is to say, what was the kind of political contributions, not just of gays and lesbians, but of progressive people generally, to the extent there were kind of gains, were they pushed from the outside and government, kind of temporized, or was it within? Was it really Clinton, for example, or Reno who were the the moving forces? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's a little more complicated than that because,
No doubt.
despite my naivete, I don't think I was the only one who was naive about some of these issues.
Yeah.
Because I honestly feel like George Stephanopoulos, for example, who was my direct boss in the White House, and Bill Clinton, and myself and others, we literally thought that we knew it was going to be controversial. We thought that Bill Clinton was going to be able to lift the ban on gays in the military. We thought it was going to be an issue.
His number one thing, by the way, coming out of the box, and everyone who listening knows that's what a president makes his sign. I forget, I guess it was the wall for Trump. I mean, this is.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if that was his number one thing, but I think.
Oh, is that right? It wasn't the first thing. So so I've got this wrong. Yeah.
No, because I worked in the Clinton campaign, and remember the old slogan, "It's the economy, stupid."
It's the economy, stupid. Yeah.
That's what he talked about relentlessly. And it was almost the media became more obsessed with the LGBTQ.
I see.
So
the narrative was it was his first loss, I guess, or expenditure of capital, or
I got the scars. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened.
Okay.
He, like every president, prepared several dozen executive orders to go out the door the first day. So you have a transition period from when you're elected to January 20th. And there were 20-something executive orders, including lifting the gag rule on abortions on military facilities around the world. And I'm gonna say something, sort of unpleasant. It was just one executive order. Sam Nunn, Democrat, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee,
Georgia,
Colin Powell, who is amazing and heroic and an incredible figure in our nation's history, but a raving homophobe, and chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The two of them decided that this was not going to happen on their watch. And they went to war with their fellow Democratic brand new president and told him this was.
Colin Powell is not a Democrat, though, right? But but their new president.
He became a supporter of Obama. Yeah. You're right. I don't know what his party affiliation was at the time. Sam Nunn, Democratic chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, held more than a dozen hearings over a 6-month period. So they agreed to 6-month hold off on the executive order for 6 months, while we, the Senate Armed Services Committee, look into the question of whether homosexuals can be in the military. Sam Nunn made a political career going around to bases, asking 18-year-olds in bunk beds with a flashlight, how would you feel if a homosexual were sleeping in this bunk with you? That's the kind of Senate hearing that he did. He tortured his fellow Southern Democrat, Bill Clinton, over this issue. How the brand got to be that Clinton couldn't get it done, or Clinton didn't fight hard enough. Clinton went to the mat for homosexuals compared to everybody else. But it was his fellow Democrats.
I'm going to disagree with you on that, Robert. I mean, we're looking at it from different points of view, I guess. The White House versus the
That's what we live for on Talking Feds.
But I agree with much of the history. I feel like what happened was the day after the election day, Bill Clinton was asked at a press conference at the state. It was either at the State House or the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. The day after the election, if he was still planning to lift the ban on gays in the military, he said yes. And at that point, the forces of the right began to mobilize against him, including Sam Nunn. And who was the senator from Virginia he did the hearings with? The Republican senator.
Warner?
Yeah, Warner. Yeah, they're the ones, they went to the bunk beds and the Navy submarines and all that kind of stuff to show the tight quarters. That was after the president was inaugurated. But what happened is that the forces on the right mobilized more quickly than the forces on the left could. I remember the first few weeks being in the old executive office building, walking through what is now the Eisenhower building, walking through the ground floor of the Eisenhower building and seeing stacks and stacks of boxes with postcards. And on the outside, you could read the postcards that they were opposed to gays in the military. I didn't see anybody sending any boxes in favor of gays in the military. So the right
Who would be sending these? Who at the time? We're talking about.
Yay, gays in the military.
Yeah, it's not real
gays
at all.
The 95% of gays never thought of serving in the military and weren't clamoring to do it. The vast majority of Americans hadn't been educated about who was this constituency that would have weighed in.
I know, but the point was, from my point of view in the White House, it looked like there was an overwhelming sense of opposition from people, and there was no support for what the president was doing. And except for the
I think you're making my point, which is why Clinton, in our view, was heroic.
Well, my point is that Clinton didn't really understand the dynamics. I felt like he was naive about this, just as I was. And then when he Clinton, like everyone,
which is, by the way, saying something. He was naive about very, very, very few things, right?
Oh yeah,
he was such a he combined. You know,
well,
he knew through the
He thought the world was changing more rapidly than it was, as did I. But this is why I don't agree with Robert's take about Clinton's heroism, because I feel like he backtracked. He backtracked completely. I remember the time it was in February, March of '93, when he was asked at a press conference, because I called you right after this happened, Robert. And he was asked at the press conference in the East Room whether he would support segregating troops based on their sexual orientation. And he said yes. And I was horrified. I was sitting in the room. I was like, I can't believe he said this. And everybody in the White House, including George, was delighted by the whole press conference. They thought he did a great job. I called Robert immediately. I said, this is horrible. This is going to blow up in our faces. And immediately it blew up in our faces. And the LGBT groups came out and attacked Clinton for that. He kind of stopped talking about it. He didn't want to talk about this issue. There was a meeting he had, I remember, with Alan Greenspan, the Fed chair at the time, in the Oval. And all the reporters came in for the pool spray for the first couple of minutes, and they were there to talk about the economy, because the economy was in a recession at the moment. And one of the reporters asked him about gays in the military, and he said, "I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the economy." And so then the reporter turned to Alan Greenspan and said, "Well, what do you think about gays in the military?" I mean, the media, they were obsessed with this issue. Yeah. And the president and the White House were not prepared to respond to it. That's the reason why we defaulted to this plan, this don't ask, don't tell. I actually thought it was a compromise that might work and, buy us some time to build up support for it. But after that, Bill Clinton lost all appetite for doing anything else pro-gay. By
the way, well, yeah, that's where I want to go to. But just one final question about this first episode and the compromise solution, because George Stephanopoulos, a smart policy guy, but definitely I think willing to be progressive, leading with his heart. But even Clinton, Rahm Emanuel, right? There got to be people in the chiefs of staff, the really sort of hard, cynical people looking at the polls every day. I'm sure there were close advisors to him saying, "What the hell are you doing?"
Rahm Emanuel was a homophobe. I remember sitting in the White House.
But he was a very, very powerful homophobe.
He was. I remember sitting in the White House with him one day, and he said he was talking about how he didn't want to deal with fags in the foxhole anymore. I mean, this guy was not a hero of the LGBTQ community. I know he's evolved since that time, but he was not at that time. It pissed me off, and it made me realize just how much opposition we were going to be facing to do some of these things. I know you're moving into this in the next segment, but I mean, it became clear that there were very few people in the White House inner circle who were committed to doing the right thing all the way. I think, or even, I'll just say, even in the executive branch inner circle, I would say Deval Patrick, when he became Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, myself, and Bob Hattoy, and Paul Richard. I can't think of Marcia Scott, but I can't think of too many other people who were completely committed to doing the right thing all the way through, because every time, whenever we faced political pressure, the White House consensus was, we don't want this controversy. We've got to get
once burned, twice shy. I mean, isn't that right? The experience of don't ask, don't tell, or the whole gays in the military really singed a lot of people in the area. But so let's move ahead now to the next, because I'll give you my personal experience, which was, the next big thing in DOJ was an important case in the Supreme Court, Romer versus Evans, fight, lose. And it was, so all, it's 1995, it's all, but the next, 10 years or whatever, including in the context of where things felt then, the kind of acceleration toward, near at least legal equality was, I think, the sort of most rapid and amazing of any issue that I remember. Now that's easy for me to say. It might have felt so that's why I want to serve it up. So this is a way too big question. So let's just go to, in the wake of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You've already said there's a lot of people who are hesitant. What's the next big battle?
Well, I think there are
that anyone's willing to actually,
yeah.
For me, there
are two. The first was ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and
right.
The second was Jocelyn Elders. When ENDA
explain who that is, yeah.
Jocelyn Elders was the Surgeon General who Bill Clinton appointed.
Right.
When ENDA came up for
and who eventually was drummed out, right?
Exactly my point.
Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
When the Employment Non-Discrimination Act came up for consideration, there was a meeting in the White House Roosevelt Room about whether the president should send Deval Patrick, his own handpicked Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, to go testify in favor of a bill which the president had already said that he supported. And everyone in the room, including George Stephanopoulos and Alexis Herman, all these people whom I admire and love, they all oppose the idea of sending our own civil rights attorney general to go and testify in favor of this bill. Deval Patrick and I were the only two people in the room who spoke out in favor of having him simply go and testify. So we ended up with this stupid compromise where he would just submit written testimony instead of appearing in person, which is ridiculous. And then the next issue, this was the issue for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, was when Jocelyn Elders was fired. I mean, she was fired because she went to a UN conference or something, and she spoke about HIV/AIDS, and she mentioned the word masturbation because someone asked
in response to a question from a guy. Yeah, question. Should we think about this? She said maybe we should think about it. That was the big supposed sin.
And then
I'm sorry, Robert. We're boring you. We gotta move back to you to better times.
I just want to say, and then after that, she was fired from her job, which made no sense to me because Bill Clinton knew exactly who she was when he hired her. He had worked with her in Arkansas. He knew she was controversial. It was like the Lonnie Guinier thing all over again. It's like it just didn't resonate to people as being authentic, and it was problematic for me. And I think in his heart, I really do believe Bill Clinton got it from the beginning. In the same way, by the way, I feel like Barack Obama supported gay marriage from the beginning, but then he was dishonest about it until 2012. But right. I think
people forget that, right? I mean, he, when running, says, not so long ago, and Barack Obama, marriage is between them. That remarkable, yeah.
And one of the things I learned about working in the White House, and one of the reasons why I decided I never wanted to work there again, is that your whole institutional priority becomes about what is in the best interest of one person who's in the office of the president, and not about what's in the best interest of the country or what's in the best interest of the causes you came to serve. So everybody starts to be subservient to, well, how do we make Bill Clinton or Barack Obama look good, instead of how do we decide, how do we do what's in the best interest of the needs of the people in the country, the people who elect us, the people who support us. And that's problematic to me. So I became very cynical after that whole process. And I'm glad I worked for Bill Clinton. I'm still support him, but I feel like he really let us down as a community. Not even to talk about what happened with the Defense of Marriage Act after that, but I feel like he came in with all the potential and didn't live up to his potential.
All right, so from ingenue to cynic, quite a trajectory. Robert, I wanted to ask you a somewhat more personal question. During this time, the administration is losing battles, and some are feeling, as Keith did, they weren't fighting hard or well. What was it like for you within the community? Were you taking crap from friends about, you guys aren't moving hard? Were people disgruntled? Were you on the defensive? What was it like kind of personally within the community as someone in an administration that had come in with great hopes and was temporizing?
Great question. And this is a really, really terrific conversation. Thank you. Thank you for doing it. I was senior at a law enforcement agency. It was a little different. We were able to provide protection. So when there was violence, the Matthew Shepard lynching,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my experience with my community, to the extent we have a community, was being point of entry for relief from horror, discrimination, violence, unfair investigations, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a different take. If I were at HHS or the Department of Education, sort of funding agencies, it probably would have been more of a brawl and very different. And I will use that distinction to point out something, and it's true, I think, for all advancement of civil rights for any, quote, minority group, end quote. There's a huge difference between asking people to affirm and validate you from the question of, I don't care what you think about me, you shouldn't be able to hurt me. The beginning phase of most civil rights, and it's true for African Americans, and it's true for different gay community, et cetera, is I don't care what you think of me. You shouldn't be able to kill me. That's what anti-discrimination laws are rooted in. And it's a very, very different relationship with voters, with the media, with the public. Gay marriage called the question. That was about affirm me. I count at your table. I want to be in your church. And it just shakes the system up as to who supports you and who doesn't. So at Department of Justice, we were in the business basically, except for the Solicitor General, which had to weigh in on everything. We were in the business of, you can hate me, as Dana Rohrabacher did, or all kinds of Rahm Emanuels or whomever. But do you think it's a good idea for me to be beaten by the police? No. So Keith, when you're sort of laying out the struggles that you had and I'm glad you were in, as you call it, the Oval, which is a true sign of an insider to call it the Oval. I'm glad you were there. I'm sorry that you saw what you saw. I have the same experience in that I've been at this 30 years and I've seen people disappoint me constantly. But I still have an optimism about it, which is sometimes they're assholes. That they say one thing publicly, but they mean something different privately. And those people just need to be exposed, political leaders who are not telling you the truth. But the vast majority of the time, I think they are rational actors responding to a larger system. I'm not the kind of person, although I fight for the rights of all kinds of communities, I'm not interested in my leader walking the plank for me because it makes me feel good. I don't want, for example, defund the police. I know where that comes from. It's a redistribution of resources to better uses. But if the right has so demonized what you're talking about, such that you can't have a conversation with most people, I don't insist that my people go out there and keep banging their head against the wall. So that's sort of a modern analogy. If Biden were asked about defunding the police, I don't mind him repudiating that phrase as long as he can move on to a concept. And that's what happens so much in public life, that our people, however you define that, a broader civil rights community, didn't do the work fast enough with the American public to provide a plurality or a working majority politically to support these leaders. So I hear you with your sort of disappointment about these leaders not fighting hard enough. But for me, it's much more specific. If their motivation is they don't care, then they can go fuck themselves. I agree with you. But if their motivation is I'm a rational actor and I can't keep going out there getting hammered saying the same thing over and over again, the burden shifts to us to go do the work to give them political support.
But Robert, I agree with you. Remember, I was the one who talked about the boxes being stacked up and not seeing the boxes from people on our side. Yes, we have to build the community support to give the cover for the political actors. On the other hand, though, I think the way you frame the analysis, I think is really helpful, because I don't think that they took that second step. Yes, I agree. You don't have to lead with your chin and be the victim in order to support a particular community or cause. However, you don't have to run away from that community either, which is what I think the White House did on LGBTQ issues. I think the Democratic Party ran away from LGBTQ issues
until the white guys showed up with money.
Well,
until the white gay
always the case
showed up with money, and then it was like, whoa, it's a community. Whoa, we understand these people. That's exactly what happened.
You know, and that's another hour discussion I'd like to have, but we don't have time, and I don't want to neglect the present. So I think from this relatively low point somewhere in the mid 90s, and Keith taking leave of the White House that he'd started with such hope about, we have a remarkable period of legal and social, or maybe you'd call it social and legal recognition, even acceptance. And now things are funky. I'll just put it that way. So let's just, if I could, close with your current thoughts as still, very much in the community, but maybe a second or third generation of issues and struggles, to assess how much you fear, or by how much, I mean, how big a retrenchment do you think is possible in American society in 2023? What's it like for Roberts, the 13-year-old now in Miami or Kentucky or Oklahoma or Berkeley, California? And where sort of are we, and what's your level of sanguinity for this juncture in American history with respect to the LGBTQ community?
I'll go quickly, but thank you for the question. One always has to be vigilant, American and probably other cultures too, other nations too, but American history it's a constant churn of advancement and retrenchment, most palpably for African Americans, but for anybody trying to sort of get into the table of power. But clearly there's been fantastic advancement, and there'll be retrenchment. It's a couple things going on. One, the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest and best funded LGBTQ organization that we've seen, certainly on the political sphere, made a strategic decision which was fantastically successful. I criticize it because it left out a lot of Americans, the working class, people of color. But they commodified gay America. They couldn't win on the political class, and so they went to culture and business. And it was brilliant, and it had a lot of unintended or intended consequences, but they sold gay people to the American public as whiter, more male than we are, and wealthier, as a consumer class. And they persuaded most of corporate America and Hollywood to treat us as one would if you were sort of a palpable market that you were trying to penetrate. And it worked. And politics is following culture. So yesterday in the House Armed Services Committee, the Republicans are trying to force DOD, the Pentagon, to stop doing diversity training. And Steve Horsford, the chair of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, who sits on the committee, points out that the top 10 military contractors, Boeing and Lockheed and Raytheon and whatever, are all off the charts in terms of diversity. Go to their website. You think it was the old Benetton. Anyway, we've won in culture and corporate America. The gays have. Trans is a different issue. So you're seeing two things. One, we've won on culture, largely. Still a lot more to do. And the political class is kind of flipping back and forth with terrible laws. But what you're really seeing now is exactly what you saw with gays 25 and 30 years ago. You're seeing the country wrestle with, what does trans mean? What are the contours? What is the definition? What are the limits? Who decides? These are wrenching issues. I don't think anyone should pretend that whether or not to have physical surgery at the age of 11 is an easy call, and who should decide it. So I'm extremely hopeful. I am very, very confident that on these issues, the question of gender identity, the question on the relationship between gender identity and gays, we're basically moving in a good direction in this country, but there's no question that conservatives are threatened and will do what they can either to hold their position or to make money off of us. You'll recall Ken Mellman, who was a closeted gay person, helped George Bush get reelected by demonizing us by banning gay marriage all over the country. Well, he's come out, Ken Mellman, gay, doing good work, and we have gay marriage. And I think we're going to see the same thing with questions of trans.
I not surprisingly, I'm a little less sanguine than Robert. I feel I'm not sure that we've won the culture wars or the commercial or capitalistic wars, or whatever the term was he used in terms of the business world. In particular, I look at situations like Target. It feels like a lot, my old law professor, Derek Bell, used to talk about the interest convergence theory, in which he said that white people would only do the right thing when it served the right interest. I feel like corporate America has believed that it was in its interest for the past 20 years or so to do the LGBTQ inclusive thing, but now they're feeling backlash and pressure, and they're not so sure that it is. So I don't know that we've won that war. I'm kind of questioning that. I also feel like the trans issue is a difficult issue, and I understand why it's a complicated issue for a lot of people in the world and the country. But at the same time, this was something that was a subject of debate in the 90s and early 2000s in the LGBTQIA community, because there were a lot of sort of mainstream people and leaders who didn't want to include trans issues because they felt that it was going to marginalize our community. It was going to slow down the march toward progress. And I applaud those who chose to include it, even though it's a harder struggle, a harder fight. But I applaud those who chose to include that community, because they are the people who helped to build the bridges, to tear down the walls, and to throw the bricks at Stonewall to initiate our movement. But lastly, and this is where I do have a sense of hope and optimism, I feel like all those struggles I was talking about in the early 1990s and the Clinton administration, I feel like there's one good thing that you can never take away from what Bill Clinton did and what practically every other Democratic president has done in my lifetime, which is appointments. Bill Clinton appointed Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, two of the critical votes who helped to make those decisions to liberate LGBTQIA people from discrimination. Bill Clinton appointed a record number of openly LGBTQIA people to his administration, not just the White House, but in cabinet officials like Robert and Roberta Achtenberg and so many others. I think sometimes we get caught up. Those of us who identify as progressive, we get caught up sometimes by the fact that the leader at the top is incapable of doing the things we want them to do, and so we kind of step away completely instead of fighting for as much as we can, and most importantly, fighting to get those people in place who can move on to make an impact. Like I mentioned, for example, earlier, Deval Patrick, Bill Clinton's appointee to be Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, ends up becoming the governor of Massachusetts, and one of the most pro-gay governors in the state's history. And I think that those appointments are critical in terms of building the bridges to the future. And every time we have an election, I don't care if it's Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, even if you don't fully support them, the one thing that they can do, not just judicial appointments in the Supreme Court, but the one thing they can do that can really make a huge difference and a long-term lasting impact is those appointments. And I applaud all those Democratic presidents who were able to do that, because that has enabled so many people like Robert and myself and others to be able to have a platform to go out and spread the gospel and continue that fight.
That puts me in mind of a recognition I wanted to make, and that is to my revered, courageous, and frequently hilarious former boss, L.D. Atchison, who Robert mentioned as the first openly gay person confirmed, but she was critically involved in the judicial appointments and some other appointments in the administration, and she was also incredibly great and supportive boss to me. She wanted to be here today, and the schedule just didn't work out. Robert, Keith, this has been a really terrific discussion. Thanks so much for joining. And I really appreciate it. Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing. I have to give a shout out to Deborah Batts, who passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
The first openly gay federal judge. She helped to really, another Clinton appointee, it just really helped to break down.
Never came up at her confirmation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, you want to have the final word with a shout out?
Just how great it is to see Keith and to be reminded of the incredible fights, and although we're both dour about it, the enormous progress that we were able to do that only the federal government can do. I think about
it's like the military parades. You were in the foxholes together, you old gents, etc.
Go, Rahm Emanuel.
Exactly right. Thanks so much. I really, on top of everything else, it was fun but so informative. Thanks to you both for joining a special episode of Talking Feds in recognition, especially of Pride Month. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.